Good. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Eric. I'm going to give you a little bit of a bio on Eric. I had gotten a copy from Sean McKenna from Kamloops chapter, or from the club in Kamloops, regarding Eric's presentation to their group. And I was very impressed with what I heard and what I saw. So I pursued the opportunity to see if Eric would speak to our group, and here he is today. Eric retired from teaching biology and biochemistry at TRU in 2016. As a young man, as he puts it, he cycled extensively, but had become a lapsed cyclist. Through the Kamloops Grasslands Probus Cycling Group, he got reinitiated into cycling, bought an e-bike, and has been pedaling around the countryside ever since. His research into e-bikes has been extensive, and today he will share some of the knowledge with our Probus group. I'm going to turn it over to Eric. Thank you again, Eric, for participating. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, it's easy to get me to talk about these things. Okay, so I want to share my screen, and is okay, can everybody see that? Okay.
Yes.
So as Gary said, I've cycled most of my life, but you know, life happens, and you stop doing it quite so much. That, you know, as a young man, I would ride everywhere. I commuted on a bike. I can hardly believe it these days, but at one point for a summer job in Victoria, I did a 28-mile round trip every day on my bike for commuting. But then I ended up attending SFU, which most of you will know is at the top of a mountain, and at top of a mountain with no bike lanes and terrible weather. So that sort of began the slide into being much less of a cyclist. But about 25 years ago, we settled in Cherry Creek outside Kamloops, and I began to ride more around our the sort of uncrowded country roads, and you know, enjoyed doing that. But you know, as I hit my 50s, I found I was doing it less and less. And part of the reason was just, this is a picture from my kitchen window of my driveway. For context, that motorhome in the center of the picture is a 32-footer, and so trying to get up this hill was a bit of an issue. And I find I'd start my ride all tuckered out from just getting out to the road. But then what really did it for me was my grandkids and their family are avid mountain bikers, and I was going out riding with them, and we were riding up the driveway, and my 6-year-old grandson, I'm getting off my bike to start to push it up this hill. My 6-year-old grandson, who's going up it like it wasn't there, turns around and says, "Come on, Grandpa, you can rest on the way down." And I thought, no, I'm getting blown into the weeds by a 6-year-old. This will never do. But I then also began, our Probus group has a cycling group, and I signed up for that, and we started riding, because one of the issues around Kamloops is that, you know, everything is like this, and part of the advantage of hooking up with a group of experienced cyclists in the area was learning some of the great routes that there are around this part of the world. And so I you know, got into doing that, and I found it to be very helpful. So this is a picture of my grandson. He was 7. This is along the Adams River. He's making a 7-year-old face at having his picture taken. But yeah, rides like that can be a great deal of fun. And what I've really gotten into loving doing it with the e-bike, because I can then, you fear no hills, you fear no headwinds, and you can do a lot more than you would otherwise be able to do. But I also, as I began to research e-bikes, there's just an incredible incredibly dizzying array of choices out there, and I found it would be kind of overwhelming. So I've been trying to share what I've learned with other people. Here's a picture of some of our group riding along the trail from the rail trail between Oyama and Vernon, which is a beautiful ride. And there's a lot of these rail trails around the area. And as you can see, they're nice and flat. Railways don't like hills. And so when the old tracks get converted into trails, they become really excellent biking corridors. So what's it like to ride an e-bike? Well, it's like riding a bike, except that you've had the legs of a 20-year-old grafted onto you. It's really that's all it is. It's not a power cycle, it's a pedal assist, and it provides an additional boost to the effort that you're putting in to biking. They're very simple. This is a picture of the control panel for my bike. Very simple. The two big buttons are for more power or less power. And so you get, you can just, click up, click down. That's all you need to do to get more power or less power. It's extremely simple. You'll hear, one of the things you'll hear is that people say you don't get any exercise riding an e-bike, and that's entirely not true. That you can choose how much exercise you get by selecting how much power you're requesting. So you can turn it right off and ride it like a normal bike. You can have a little bit of power, a lot of power, and trust me, by the end of some of these rides, I'm huffing and puffing. I've gotten lots of exercise. If I'm not in that kind of mood, I can crank up the power and off you go. So here's some of the kinds of bikes you'll see. I mean, they're fundamentally bicycles. And so every kind of bicycle that you can imagine is available in an e-bike version. So you're not limited to one kind of bike. And these are all different sorts of e-bikes. And there's just a huge variety of choices out there. But so I'm fundamentally talking about bicycles. I'm not talking about electric motorcycles or electric scooters. Those are classed as motor vehicles because they will exceed 32 kilometers an hour, and you need a license and insurance and all that sort of stuff. E-bikes are not this kind of machine. So you'll run into a dizzying array of definitions. And one of the first ones you'll see are the notions of classes of e-bikes. There's 3 classes of e-bikes, which are imaginatively called class 1, class 2, and class 3. Class 1 that's the sort I ride. The motor only provides assistance if you're pedaling. So I stop pedaling, the motor stops providing power. So fundamentally, it's just a boost for my effort. The motors are limited in the maximum power. It cannot have a throttle. Some of the e-bikes will have a throttle that you can allow you to go without pedaling. This is not permitted. They cannot exceed, or the power kicks off at 32 kilometers an hour. You can ride them faster than that, but that's up to the leg motor providing that power. And the class 1 e-bikes are not considered motor vehicles, and generally they're allowed anywhere a regular bike is allowed. And this can be an issue where some trails will ban e-bikes, but a class 1 e-bike is not considered different than a regular bike. Class 2 is the same, except that you're permitted to have a throttle, and these are also quite common. But the class 2 e-bikes are not permitted on trails in BC parks, for example. So something to bear in mind when you're researching what you want to have. That being said, as long as you're not riding like an idiot, no one's ever going to give you any grief. And then class 3 bikes are bigger, more powerful, and faster. They are not technically allowed in British Columbia without insurance and license and so on, though you are able to order them online. But I won't be dealing with the class 3 bikes at all. So one of the first things you'll encounter is a choice of the drive system. And there's two basic styles of drive. One is the hub drive motor, where the motor is in the center of the wheel. And the other is a mid-drive motor, where the motor is located in the bottom bracket where the pedals are. Typically, the lower price bikes will tend to have a hub drive motor. So these hub drive systems, there's a picture of one there. They, as I say, they're the most common and the least expensive. You can actually retrofit these to existing bikes. Basically, you buy a kit that consists of a new wheel and a battery and a controller, and just replace the wheel, and you've got yourself an e-bike. These tend to be the least sophisticated systems, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But they also tend to need to be more powerful, just because they don't take advantage of the gearing. They're applying power after you've run through the gears. So they need to be that little bit more powerful. This is a picture of a typical kit that you can buy. So the wheel with the motor in it, the battery, and the electronics, and they're widely available. If you just Google e-bike conversion, you'll have hundreds and hundreds of choices. Most of the people that I'm riding with who are riding e-bikes are riding hub drive motors. They're, they work fine. The mid-motor type, this is a closer picture of the setup. Because the bottom bracket of the bike has to fit the motor, you can't easily do one of these as a do-it-yourself conversion. But this is the route that most of the major bike manufacturers have taken for for their e-bikes. Because they take advantage of the mechanical advantage of the gearing, they can be less powerful motors, which means that they can have greater range because they aren't requiring as much battery to run the less powerful motor. Because e-bikes have a lot of weight in them, but with the mid-drive motors, the weight is low in the bike and is right in the center of the bike. So the bikes tend to handle better. They tend to be, feel more natural in terms of the way the bikes handle. Though it's not fundamental to mid-drive versus hub drive, the mid-drives tend to be more expensive, and they come with better sensor packages, which I'll describe in a minute, and those can make them nicer to ride. So the sensors do a number of things. The first is they detect if you're pedaling or not. So when you stop pedaling, you want the motor to cut out. And so the simplest ones simply turn the motor on or off. The more sophisticated ones will provide power as a percentage of what you're putting out. So if you're putting in a little bit of effort, they'll give you a little bit of boost. If you're putting in a lot of effort, they'll give you a lot of boost. And so this gives a very natural feel to the way the bike works. The strictly on-off ones can feel a bit crude, but again, they work fine. And part of what you'll need to think about if you're looking at an e-bike is, how am I going to use it? If you're just going for a ride around a campground with your grandkids, then almost anything will do. If you're trying to ride more complicated trails where a finer degree of control is necessary, you're going to want a more sophisticated bike. So part of this will be deciding what kind of use you want to put the bike to. Batteries. There's all kinds of hype around the batteries and how wonderful each company's battery packs are and all this stuff. You'll see various people promoting whether it's 36 or 48 volts. Don't worry about it. It makes no functional difference. They have their own special cases, but the actual battery cells inside the cases are virtually all the same. So again, don't worry about it. You can have external batteries that go on the rack at the back or clamp onto the down tube, or you can have integrated ones. one's nicer looking than the other, but again, it makes no functional difference. If what you're going to be comparing are the watt-hour ratings, that will give you an idea of the capacity of the battery to power the bike. In terms of range, bigger is better, but bigger is also much more expensive and heavier. They're almost all lithium-ion batteries. Lithium-ion batteries are expensive, so if you want a lot of them, it's going to cost you more money, kind of like most things in life. Range, again, the people I've talked to who are contemplating e-bikes will tend to get very hung up on range. How far will this thing go? And the answer really is it depends. That I can get more than 100 kilometers out of a charge, or in one case, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Fintry Provincial Park, but the road from the park up to the highway is, you zigzag up this very, very steep embankment. I say I can do 100 kilometers on a charge, or one day I rode up that road to out of Fintry just for the hell of it. And in 1 kilometer, I used up a third of my battery capacity because it's such a steep hill. So, it depends. What I have discovered over the last 3 years riding an e-bike is the range of my battery is far greater than the range of my butt. My butt will start complaining before the battery does. So the short answer is don't worry about it. Almost any e-bike on the market will have enough range for you to go on recreational rides without any difficulty. So how do you choose an e-bike? We say there's this dizzying array of choice out there. So you have to think about fit. Can you actually get a leg over this thing? Is it too big for you or too small for you? And so that's one of the considerations. What kind of use are you going to put it to? Are you going to be a hardcore mountain biker, or are you going to gently potter along the beach? Then that will help guide you into what kind of bike you want to get. Budget, always a factor. And you can buy an e-bike from about $1,500 up to about $15,000. And as in most things, the first few steps up the ladder give you significant improvements. As you get higher up, little improvements start to cost more. Same as everything in life. Weight is an issue. These things are heavy, so you'll need to think about how you're going to use it. Now, when you're riding them, the weight isn't that much of an issue, but when you're loading it onto and off of a rack, that can be an issue. And some people find them, difficult to manage that way. So that'll be something to think about. And right now, used e-bikes, used bikes of any kind, are nearly impossible to find. And indeed, the new ones are getting to be hard to find, just because, like everything else recreational right now during COVID, people aren't spending money on trips, and they're spending money on recreational activities close to home. So use, what kind of uses do you put an e-bike to? Well, same as any other bike. So you can have a beach cruiser type bike for gentle recreational riding. This is a road bike in an e-bike form where it's primarily designed for riding on pavement. Gravel bikes, which are more suited to these kind of rail trail environments. I really got into that. I found this to be tremendously entertaining riding, because you get yourself out in nature, and it can be a very pleasant ride. But with this group, and with most of the Probus groups, I expect what most of you are going to be doing is extreme downhill, something like this. That is an e-bike, and many people even survive doing this, but it's not something that most of us will get into doing. But think about the use primarily, because again, primarily this is a bike, not, don't get too obsessed about the E part. Fit. The more expensive bikes will come in different frame sizes. And this is a chart from one of the major manufacturers giving the size ranges for the different frame size. The less expensive bikes will only come in one frame size. If you can, it's a good idea to go and try them out to see how well they fit. Now, the fit is more important with a traditional triangular style bike frame than it is through a step through bike frame, but still it's a consideration to think about. So here's a traditional triangular style bike. One of the things you want to look at is what's called the standover height, which is basically the height of the crossbar at the top. Because if you get off the saddle, either intentionally or because your feet have slipped off the pedals, having too high a standover height can be painful. So that's one of the things you want to think about. Most seniors, though, are much more interested in what's known as a step-through bike. When I was a lad thousands of years ago, we called a girls' bike, but they're not thought of that way anymore. Just because as you get older, it's harder and harder to throw a leg over a triangle bike. And you say, as I say, these step-through bikes have become incredibly popular, and probably most of the e-bikes on the market are of the step-through design. So here's a classic picture of the use of an e-bike in a step-through design. And I do see a lot of men riding this style. And what you see girls doing these days is something more like this. Riding a triangular bike. This is the amazing Catherine Pendrell of Kamloops. She's a multi-time world cross-country mountain bike champion and an Olympic medalist. So don't assume the girls are going to be daintily riding the step-through designs. There's some pretty hardcore mountain bikers around. So I just want to touch a little bit more on the weight. The bikes will range from 35 to about 80 pounds. Now, the 80-pound ones are rare, but most of them seem to fall into that sort of 45 to 55-pound range, which is significant if you're going to be trying to lift it. Now, when you're transporting the bike, you take the battery off. I mean, it's a legal requirement that you transport these things unenergized. So you can take the battery off, which knocks 7 to 10 pounds off the weight of the bike. But if you're thinking about hoisting an e-bike onto a rack on the top of your car, I can't do it, and I don't think many people can. Bike racks that you put the typical bike rack you see that fits into a trailer hitch receiver, all have weight limits for them. So if you're buying a rack, ask about the weight limits. Will it tolerate the weight of a couple of e-bikes on it? Think about the hitch on your car. A class 1 receiver, which is typical for smaller vehicles, has a tongue weight limit of 200 pounds. Well, if you put 3 or 4 e-bikes on it, you're getting perilously close to the weight limit of the hitch. So it's not a crucial thing, but if you're going to be lugging the bike anywhere, it is something that you need to consider. So in choosing an e-bike, you'll notice that I haven't been talking a lot about trying to find the right motor, the right battery, the right range, any of that sort of stuff. Fundamentally, choose the bike that is best suited to the use that you want to put to it, and then go and find the e-version that is going to best suit your needs, your budget, and your weight limits and that sort of thing. Generally, as with many things in life, try and get the highest quality e-bike that you can afford. The low-end bikes tend to have cheap components on them. They work, but they tend to be more fragile and more in need of fettling all the time to keep them running well. So usually the recommendation is that buy the most expensive bike that you can get past your spouse, and try and do that. You'll be happiest in the long run. I've found that it's helped my fitness enormously. I've gone out to see lots of really great country all over the place. Our Probus group has ridden all over the Kamloops area, all through the Shuswap. We did a trip the year before last out into the Kootenays and the Slocan Valley, which was great fun. Bike riding is you naturally socially distant. You don't want to get too close to somebody else on a bike. If you do, you're apt to end up in a heap on the ground, which is inconvenient. So it's a great thing to do, and I found that I've been able to then more or less keep up with my grandkids and be able to go riding with them in a way that I never could before, because of course, as you get older, you tend to get slower, and as they get older, they tend to get faster. And so it's a great thing to do, and it's really changed the way I live my life, and really opened up a lot of frontiers for me. So yeah, I'm a great fan. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So I actually have a question, and then I see Sherry has a question. If you want to be able to, if you're done your presentation, you might want to stop the screen share.
Yep.
Is there more there to go, Eric?
There we go.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about with the transporting it with my bike. I can put it inside of my Honda CRV.
Yep.
So would I be able to do the same? And I know some of the bikes, like my bike, you can pretty easily take the front wheel off and put it in.
Yes, so that's exactly the same as, the way the wheels work is exactly the same as any other bike. So if you have a quick release front wheel on your current bike, you can get a quick release wheel on your e-bike. In terms of how they mount to the racks or you put them in the car, any of that sort of thing, exactly the same except for the weight.
Dorothy?
Yes.
It's Maureen here. I was out yesterday riding, and I had a lady with me who had an e-bike, and she's a pretty fit lady. She cannot lift her 48-pound e-bike. So it's really something that if you go, I would recommend that you take your car and your rack or whatever and try and lift it on there, because she cannot. Her husband helped to put it on at home. I had to help her to put it on and take it off and put it on the trail.
Yeah, there are racks that have a ramp.
Yeah.
You can run the bike up onto the ramp. And many of the e-bikes have what's known as the walk mode. So if you push a button, it will gently power the bike if you're pushing it when you're walking beside it. And you can use that to get the bike up the ramp. So it's not impossible. But again, that's part of why I emphasize thinking about this before you choose a particular bike.
You're right, Eric, because her friend has a walk-up ramp on hers. She bought a special rack with it on.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, you got to think about 48 pounds lifting that dead weight and keeping the tires straight so you can get it in the slot of the bike too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I transport my bike with a tailgate pad on a pickup, so I have to lift it up fairly high.
Yeah.
And some of the other people in the Probus group, my bike is not a particularly heavy one. Other people have some pretty heavy bikes, and I'll transport their bikes for them, and it gets dodgy when you're trying to get this thing up there.
I was thinking exactly the same thing about that, because I know when I got my kayak, I said I only had one criteria. I had to be able to lift it into my car, because you have to think about that. I was going to just tell you all, I took the spotlight off of Eric now, so if you want to switch yourself back to gallery view so you can see everybody, you can do that. Sherry, I think you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Dorothy. Eric, first of all, your presentation was excellent. I really enjoyed it. My question, though, is in the first part we were talking about, I think you said they were the class 1, and you had said that if you stop pedaling, the bike stops. But when you're pedaling like a regular 10 speed, you know, you'll pedal, and then if you stop pedaling, you're still coasting.
Oh, yeah.
So the bike will still coast, correct?
Right. Yeah, just the motor stops providing power. So
Okay.
you can coast, like with the motor off, you can ride it exactly like a normal bike.
Okay. I just got a little concerned there that I'd have to keep pedaling.
No, no, no.
Okay.
Oh, Brian, you've got a question? You have to unmute. You're still muted, Brian.
There we go. There we go. I was pressing the wrong button. Actually, a couple of questions, and I might have been out. I had to step out for a moment, so I might have missed this. But charging the batteries, do they just come out of a slot and go into a charger, or how does it work, Eric?
Most of them, well, they all will come off the bike, and most of them you can charge them on or off the bike. You will have a charger with a cable, and it plugs into a port on the side or the top of the battery.
Okay.
It's normally I charge mine off the bike simply because when I come back from a ride, the battery's already off the bike because I've been transporting it.
Yeah.
So I just put it on my workbench and charge it, but you can charge it on or off the bike.
Okay, so they're easy to slide in and out then. They just slide out. Yeah, okay. The second part of that question is then the battery life expectancy.
Again, it's one of those things that it depends. Typical lithium ion battery, you'll get 1,000 charge cycles out of it before it begins to degrade significantly. So long time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And again, along with Sherry, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeannie, I see.
That was a great presentation. If a person was interested in getting an e-bike, where would you suggest we start to shop?
Most of the lower priced e-bikes are only available online, and that's sort of unfortunate because it means that you can't try them out. You can't try them on for size, and that's typically where most people start in their journey through the e-bikes. The bike shops will all carry a range of e-bikes, but they will tend to be the more expensive units that'll be sort of $2,000 and up. There is a business now in Kamloops. I've forgotten the name, but they rent e-bikes, and they sell the iGo brand of e-bikes. And so, if you're interested, then one of the things I would suggest is rent one for half a day and just go play around. And, they have several different models available as a rental. And, so you can try out several different styles and, see how it works for you.
Does anybody know whether like Skookum or any of those in Salmon Arm rents e-bikes? Does anybody know?
I don't know whether they rent, they do sell, but they're typically the 48 pounders, which Eric, I wouldn't mind asking you about the lighter e-bikes. But no, you can go to Skookum. I think there's a place in Vernon too. I think there's a couple of places coming up that call e-bikes BC or something. They sell e-bikes of different variety. My
last e-bike I actually bought at Skookum, but I don't know about renting them. But they tend to sell the more expensive ones. But in your question about weight, e-bikes or bicycles generally are like bikinis. The less there is, the more it costs.
Yeah,
and
I know.
the lighter ones are the more expensive ones. Like the $15,000 e-bikes are all made of carbon fiber and weigh 30 pounds. But there's only a handful of people in the world who would ever contemplate such a thing. Unfortunately, the less expensive bikes tend to all be steel frames and much, much heavier.
Well, I'm looking at a Specialized Turbo SL. So
those are excellent bikes.
Oh. Do you have any recommendation of?
But you have to like, Dorothy, you have to like drop handlebars if you want to ride that.
The nice thing about though, I mean, you can change the handlebars to any style you want.
Yeah. I'm a drop handlebar rider, so.
Oh, okay.
Not me. I'm not like that girl going down. I was going to ask you if there are any particular brands that are better, and then I see Barb has a question too.
Um,
Oh, sorry. I just have some, there is a bike rental in what's it called? Coldstream.
oh yeah,
Where you can rent the bikes to go down the rail trail.
right.
And so we did that a couple of years ago, and that gives you a really good
Mhm.
practice. They're very light bikes. They're much lighter than the one I have. The one I have, I think, is like 60 pounds or something. I
Yeah.
can't lift it. Yeah.
So
That's all.
In terms of brands, the group I ride with, we've probably up to about 12 e-bikes from about 7 manufacturers now, and nobody's had any trouble with them. In terms of reliability, they all use the same components. For the mid-drive, there's 3 manufacturers of the mid-drive systems. There's 2 manufacturers of the hub drive systems. And there's various companies that will build or buy frames and put the various components on them. So in terms of reliability, I don't think there's a lot to worry about. It's really a matter of how well built the components are, things like brakes and shifters and that kind of thing. And then whether it fits the use and whether it fits you.
So do you still get a bike like with 27 gears?
No. Well, for one thing, certainly in mountain biking, the whole multiple front chain rings has gone away. People are only using one chain ring because typically you don't have time to shift that front chain ring. But what you see now are between 7 and 12 gears at the rear, and so you can. My bike's 11 speed. And that's lots of range. And if you need the lowest gears are low enough that you can still climb anything, but if you're running out of power and feel you need more gears, then you just click up the boost a bit. And so in a sense, the boost becomes your front derailleur. So you can essentially put it in low range by clicking up another couple of notches on the power.
Jeannie or Gary, I can't see whose hand that was up. Gary.
Okay. Yeah, just on one of our recent trips to Costco had a folding bike, so it makes it a little bit more portable if you're going to kind of travel with it. I guess it obviously also is not going to be good for any kind of great distance or use, but it was only like $374 for a folding e-bike. Are folding e-bikes any value at all?
Yes, I mean the $370 one or whatever is not going to be an e-bike. That'll be a conventional bike. But a couple of people we ride with have folding bikes, and on smooth surfaces they work fine. They aren't necessarily the most comfortable thing to ride because you can be in sort of an odd position when you're riding it. The only disadvantage of those is that they tend to always have very small wheels, and you'll find that any dips and crevices and potholes and cattle guards, for example, the little wheels drop into all those holes far more easily than a bike with bigger wheels. So I can go blitzing across a cattle guard and barely notice it, where the people on the folding bikes are and having an awful time.
Also on the conversion side of things, there is a bike shop in Chase who is advertising conversions as well as the availability of purchasing e-bikes. So if anybody's interested in searching around, I haven't been there yet to talk to the fellow, but he's quite an interesting fellow. He does a lot of work on repairs of bikes in that area.
Do you have any ballpark idea of how much it costs to convert your bike?
I looked at that because I had a Cannondale mountain bike that I had prior to buying an e-bike, and I looked into it with an eye towards converting it. But the conversions were sort of $1,000 to $1,500. and the new lower end e-bikes are sort of $1,500 to $1,800. So I could convert my old worn out Cannondale with 20-year-old components on it. And so then I went down the rabbit hole of new bikes and ended up spending way more money anyway. But
Frank?
Yeah, Eric, excellent presentation.
thank you.
And I just like to see some of the Probus people trying to go off the cliffs there, like that one picture. That'd be really something.
That's my grandson's dream.
Wow. We got Barb an e-bike last year, or the year before, I guess. And so soon came to the realization we do need a rack that we can put into our hitch receptor on the truck, because first of all, it doesn't just hang on the normal bike rack that we have that we used to put our mountain bikes on. It's got to be wheel supported on the bottom of the wheels, right? Because it is pretty heavy.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding right now is been trying to find a good rack, and they're sold out everywhere out of these racks. So we're waitlisted now well into the summer for a rack. Do you have any suggestions on that, or is that just kind of the normal situation now?
That's just the way it is. I know I was looking for racks for my truck, just because it's, it is such a grunt to get the bike over the tailgate. And I know that Swagman out of Penticton has a couple of e-bike specific racks, but they're projecting mid to late summer.
Yeah.
But people are having trouble finding racks and bikes, and even things like brake pads. I know, like my daughter and her family are really avid mountain bikers, and a lot of the people they know are having trouble finding anything to do with bikes. I mean, I know with my own bike, I bought a new bike this winter, and I'd been looking at this particular bike for quite some time, and I thought, okay, I'll go into the bike shop at the end of January. This should be lots of time to be able to find one. And I knew they didn't have one in stock, but I thought, okay, I'll go in and order one. So I go in there like January 20th or something, and they said, well, sorry, our entire 2021 allotment is sold out, and we can't get you a bike until 2022.
Wow. Yeah, we've been trying to get a rack since last year. Give up. Try again this year. Finally, I thought we have to get put on a wait list here. We're never going to get one,
Well, I started looking at used ones, and of course there aren't used e-bike specific racks around. There's lots of regular racks around, but the prices on all the used stuff has been going up because the new stuff is just not available.
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
Thanks.
That's what we get for being such good active seniors. Anyone else have questions out there? I don't see.
No, no.
I have a question, Dorothy, for Eric. It's just kind of in follow-up to Gary. The bikes that are at Costco, the e-bikes there, would you shy away from them, or is that a good starting point?
If you're looking at a pretty light duty use, they're fine. My wife actually has an e-bike that was a Costco bike 5 or 6 years ago, and I've not been impressed with the way it stood up. The E part of it has been fine, but it's things like brake levers and shifters and control pads and that kind of stuff that's been proven to be fairly fragile. As I say, when you go a couple of steps up the price ladder, you generally get a significant improvement in the quality of the components. And the Costco bikes are really built to a price.
Right.
Are they even available at Costco though? Does Costco have ones available?
I'm not sure. They used to be there, but I'm not sure about now.
Rick, I see your hand up.
Just a quick comment there. A friend of mine bought that folding bike from Costco, and they tried it out. Very unstable. You have to keep two hands on the handlebars. You can't go scratch your nose and that. So I'd caution people on that. They're still using it, but they that. It was a $300 one. So anyways,
Yeah, the geometry of a folding bike is a little odd, from a riding perspective.
I think, Eric, it's Maureen again. I think that comment about you really get what you pay for. Be very careful if they're cheap.
Yep.
Maureen,
Well, I know.
Maureen is our cycling expert from the Lakeview Probus Club, Eric. She's our cycling woman.
But I know in our own group, there's 3 people that bought very much bottom end e-bikes, and I've at least twice during any ride will need to stop and fiddle with something on one of their bikes because it's gone out of alignment or the brakes are rubbing or something like that. And I've been riding mine for 3 years, and have yet to have to do anything to them. But I paid double what they did.
And it's especially if you're doing long rides too.
Yep. And I think basically anything under $2,000, you're going to get compromised quality. If you're going to be riding it 5 times a year for short runs on sunny days, it'll be fine. But I also have to warn you that it's a bit addictive when you suddenly realize that you can do 50K in a day up and down hills without killing yourself. And so you start to do more, which is part of the attraction.
Absolutely. Anyone else out there? That was absolutely excellent. Thank you very much, Eric. I think
You're very welcome. It's not hard to get me to talk about something like this that I'm passionate about.
we have now passionate walkers and passionate bikers after these presentations. Now we just need to get a passionate kayaker in here, right?
Well, thank you very much, Eric. That was very, very good. Such an interesting thing for our group, to move forward with. And, from Lakeview Probus members, again, we appreciate your time and your presentation. And we look forward to maybe running across you in one of the trails, riding our e-bikes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll stop the recording now.
Thank you, Eric.